Welcome back, everyone. I'm John Stewart, and I have Ron Devine with me, and our special guest is Delahnnovah Starr Livingstone, who is through whom the Revelatorium has been given to humanity.
Correct. Yeah.
Perhaps you can show them your copy, and we have two copies here. Mine is more used than yours. How come?
Well, this one is a new one.
Anyway,
but that's a good sign. That's a good sign.
I've been doing my homework.
Yeah, the more it's been used, the more it's been used. That's good.
Yeah, I feel this material is so important that we have to go out of our way to bring it to humanity, make it readable and absorbable and easy to understand. So we're going to go through some of the points that I'll bring up, and then Ron and I are old students of Course in Miracles, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So historically, this began, it started to come through in the 1970s, was it?
Well, actually not quite. I participated in it was called a Christ Teaching through Melchizedek actions in the early 70s up until about 76. And the Revelatorium itself started coming through towards the end of the 90s. So I spent nearly 30 years just acquiescing, is the word. And I'm not the original party that the Revelatorium was to have come through.
Yes.
The original party, I won't name, had become bogged down in fourth dimensional Eastern mystic philosophies, and that cut them off from. So I was sleeping one night, just this is the way, I want to make this point because people are having this kind of stuff go on all the time and they don't know it, but the prophets got their visions at night. Lucid dreaming is basically what it's all about. So anyway, I'm sleeping one night and it wasn't a party, it just a voice was saying, we're going to give you a new responsibility because da-da-da-da, and the named party is unable to da-da-da-da. And at the time, I really truly believed that I was going to be becoming involved in the technical end of an antivirus business I was in, because I knew that the party that was handling that end of it had departed. So I thought, but about 6 months later, all of a sudden, some of the things that I knew from the Christ teaching started popping in. And I mentioned this in the other interview, but literally I sat down I was going to do a little 1.5 page about the Tree of Life, which is one of the big chapters here now. And I was going to do a 1.5 page about it. I sat down, pulled up the keyboard and got everything ready. And instead of typing Tree of Life, I typed thumbnails. 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 Now the thumbnails is chapter 36 in the book. It says boom, boom, bullets. Boom, 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 boom. So I got about 30 or 40 thumbnails down, and then I just went back, started flushing them up. That's how it started. The first one that went up on the internet was about 96 pages. That was a 99. And we're now looking at, somewhere in the area of
364 pages.
Yeah.
I should tell the viewers that we already have 2 interviews on that channel with you. So people should go back.
Well, if they go to YouTube and look at Revelatorium, if you can, it's Revelatorium. That'll bring up the 2. One is called. Well, one shows me a picture pointing out of the screen, and the other is an orange and yellow background. Those are both done here with Hugh Riley in this very room.
Yes.
And there was a couple of others that were done earlier. One was a radio interview with, Rob McConnell from Hamilton? He has X Zone, that's it, X Zone. The first half was a radio interview. The first half was very challenging. He kept.
Yes, I watched that.
And I asked him. He said, "Well, my job is to debunk phonies."
Yes, right.
See, but halfway through, we stopped trying to debunk me and started to listen. Finally,
he was quite supportive.
Towards the he did. Yeah, he became quite. It was good. So
I have my own series called Divine Physics for those of you who are interested. Anyway, so let's move along, and I'd like to bring up some questions that I've got from reading the book, and the order that I got them. First of all, it talks about the creators, plural. So it's not God; God is Mother, Father.
The Holy Trinity is a family principle of Father, Mother, only begotten Son, Daughter. It's a family principle, same as above, so below. As above, so below. And the family principle, there's an intelligent design behind all creation, which the first 4, 5 chapters of the book deals with. Ultimately simple, but very, very subtle in its details.
Yes.
It's the toughest part of the Revelatorium, especially chapter 3.
Yeah.
But long and short of it is that you have a Alpha. Your creators are Alpha and Omega, Mother and Father. They always were, and the only begotten Son daughter was begat because it brought in a third principle called energy. You now have will, desire, and action. You have intelligence, energy, and substance, and all of creation is built from intelligence, energy, and substance.
Right.
So that was the factor that allowed creation.
Yeah. Let me go on page 337. It talks about Alpha and Omega. Defines them, but it says there's two kinds. There's an unexpressed Alpha and Omega, and there's an expressed.
Well, the 15th dimension up to the 18th is unmanifested.
Unmanifested.
Unexpressed. It's in the air everywhere, I guess is the best way to put it. The 14th dimension is the first outer manifestation of the principles into a manifested form, and through the Cuban sphere, which is the 14th dimension, all of the frequencies of creation have come through, which is completely manifested or expressed. So the expressed part of the creators is the 14th dimension and below. And the unexpressed are the Holy Trinity at the 15th dimension.
That's right, the more obscure. Now, in the book of Genesis of the Bible, the Old Bible, it talks about the unmanifest God and the manifest God.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So there are parallels there.
The thing is, the Bible is not that far off the mark. I'm not saying it's not 100% other way. What's the problem with, or the problem with the Bible is that how it's being taught. And it's being taught by people that didn't understand the language they were translating from originally.
That's right, of course. Distortions in the translation.
Yeah, and then in particular the King James Version, which came along in the 16th century, was commissioned as a Bible for the people in the street. So it was enormously simplified. So everybody says the Word of God is in the Bible. If it's not in the Bible, it's not the Word of God. Well, twice it's been. See, but the other thing too is they're saying that God went way, way out of his way to talk to mankind all the way through up until 2,000 years ago, and then apparently stopped. Nothing since, because if it's not in the Bible, it can't be from the Word of God. Well, think her through.
Seems to be true.
A lot of the Bible is symbolic and metaphorical, isn't it? And people take it literally.
Exactly. Can I give you a really quick example? Because that, it'll almost answer most of your questions about that. And the one I like, because it's the most representative, is the Ark of the Covenant, which is believed to be a box with rays coming off it, buried somewhere, nobody knows where. All right. The Ark, whenever you have an agreement, like we had an agreement that I would come and you would interview. So we had agreement, an Ark in consciousness.
So a covenant is an agreement.
It's not a covenant is an agreement. The agreement was between God, Alpha and Omega, but let's use the word God, because that everybody's familiar with that. We're not talking about the Old Testament God. We're talking about the real God, all right? So the between God and the Israelis, or Israelites, that they would act as crucible for the upcoming advent of Christ. Okay? And that was the Ark of the Covenant. That was the Ark of the agreement they formed, was the Ark of the Covenant. And the society at the time was very debased. So Moses was given the 10 Commandments to get them up to speed in time for, Christ's incarnation 2,000 years ago, which it did. He incarnated into a vastly more, let's say a better spiritually evolved society 2,000 years ago than when the Ark of the Covenant was made. So the Bible doesn't teach you that.
No.
But that's what happened.
A parallel concept is that of the Holy Grail.
Well, again,
the Holy Grail is between the pineal and the pituitary.
It's a cup-shaped induction center, and it inducts fifth-dimensional substance frequencies called manna from heaven.
So we think of the pineal as a third eye, but it's not. It's this.
It's a part
cup
of
shape, or
but it is a third eye too, because if you're when you're lucid dreaming, you're actually it's your third eye that you're seeing through. If you can shut your eyes, this is before you fall asleep. If you can shut your eyes and you can see a nice clear 3D image in front of you with your eyes closed, your pineal gland is open.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Which you can do sometimes. I mean, you can shut your eyes, and you'd think of it as an after image. You see the same thing that you were seeing outside, with your eyes closed. But if you turn your head around, you'll see the.
Well, David Wilcox in his book source field investigation tells us that the deep anatomy of the pineal has these little crystals that act as receivers,
Sure.
visual, giving rise to pictures in the pineal.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't know the mechanism. It's not my. I wasn't showing how the pineal works. I just show what it does, you know.
Sometimes
But
that's what we
I
all
won't
do,
disagree with that at
become
all.
observers.
Yeah.
One other thing, the origin of alpha and omega. It says here that they gradually consciousness became aware of itself, and then they became alpha and omega.
This starts right back the beginning. Now this is the tough chapter. This is chapter 3.
Yeah.
It's funny, we were going to avoid the tough stuff, and here we are right at the beginning, right? The toughest part of the whole book. But I'll try and the begin. The 18th dimension comprises nothing but intelligent breath and tiny particles of substance. Now they're intermeshed, but they don't connect with each other. They're intermeshed. If there's breath, there's particles. If there's particles, there's breath. And the breath is a unified single whole, and the tiny particles are.
And that preceded the alpha and omega, right?
They were that was just vibrations. They had the vibrations of life in them because they were vibrating, but the vibration levels were infinitely high.
Of course.
So they.
Maybe they evolved.
No, they didn't
Lord,
evolve.
did
It's
they
the other
not?
way around. It's the other way around.
Oh, yeah.
It was subject to entropy, causaless entropy, which
which
means
is randomness
they were slowly falling in frequency, slower and slower, until the original frequency is so high. So I liken it to like a flatline stasis. You know, there's you can't see anything in there. There's so many, and then it starts to open up a bit, gets more and more. Eventually, the mixture started getting complex enough that out of that started the beginnings of consciousness. And then eventually the intelligent breath became conscious, and the tiny particles collectively became consciousness. One finally tuned into themselves, as it were, and called himself Alpha. Now, Alpha and Omega are the names given. It was given in the Bible. I am Alpha and Omega, beginning and never ending. Nobody ever says, who the heck are Alpha and Omega? But right out of the blue, right in the middle of God says this, God showed me this, God I am Alpha and Omega. Very, very, very interesting. Right there. But in the I figure Alpha and Omega probably goes all the way up through the 5th dimension. In the 7th dimension and higher, they would have more exotic names. Also, the beginning. I mean, this as far as our consciousness can go back to that point. There must be something before that. You know, I know there has to be, but what? Who knows? And it's not even our place to know, evidently. But anyway, here we are. So now Alpha and Omega have become aware, of themselves and personified themselves. And then eventually Alpha discovered Omega in the darkness. And in that discovery, the first connection of the vibrations met for the first time. And there was a fusion of the light frequencies into what's called light. Out of the darkness came the light. But they also had come to realize that their vibrations were falling and falling and falling. And I use the expression here, a logical conundrum, because you can have a vibration infinitely, number of vibrations a second, you can have it infinitely times higher. It can never end going higher. But coming down, it eventually reaches absolute zero and it's ended. That's the end of it.
So there is a real infinity. It doesn't sort of come to a
going up. No, going up there isn't.
It just keeps going and
but
going.
Coming down, it's like any vibration. It gets slower and slower and slower and slower, and then when there's no more vibration, there's no more whatever. So they saw an inevitable end. Their intelligent breath and tiny particles of substance in the 18th dimensionality was faded.
These tiny particles, that reminds me of Glenda Green's adamantine particles in her book. Do you remember that, Ron?
No,
it's interesting enough. A lot of people are picking up on that type of concept, like 100,000
strings in string theory. They're infinitesimally small.
100,000 make up an electron. That's how small they are.
Yeah. Well, that would be string theory, maybe.
Yeah. So that's why I say people are. It's starting to happen now, more and more rapidly. But starting maybe 50 years ago, and it's going exponentially up. Even the dullest. The people in the desert now know about astrology. Well, in the 60s, if you spoke about astrology, you were a kook.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, if you don't speak about astrology, you're square.
Or reincarnation, too,
and so on. Reincarnation is now moving in, too.
It is.
And, of course, it's a fundamental principle of creation.
Yeah, and there's so much research had been done, particularly Dr. Stevenson's book on reincarnation.
Yeah.
Scientific evidence, Well, I wanted to talk about the only begotten son, daughter.
Well, again, this is now, they had to come up with some way to convert their frequencies into eternal frequencies instead of the faded falling ones.
Yeah.
This is the plan they came up with. They tried plan after plan, but the one that they came up with that worked, which is the one we're in, was to create a family principle, father, mother, and only begotten son, daughter. The attribute of the intelligence, of the breath was intelligence, and the attribute of the particles was substance. Which is the attribute of the father and attribute of the mother. So they without going into details, because it's a fairly long chapter there, the only begotten son, daughter was when they unified their consciousness together, it did two things. It formed a permanent presence of this light that I was talking about.
Okay, it came out of light.
Because light is like a Kodak
So there was no light before that?
Out of the darkness came the light. That basically it was a newfound discovery. And they figured if they formed a permanent arc and consciousness between them by unifying their consciousnesses, then they would establish a permanent presence of the light.
So it was like a third intelligence?
Well, almost to a certain point. What they did was take they took the part of omega that was an algorithm zone, and they made that the sun and the part of
I see.
Anyway,
male,
so
female,
they created the son and daughter consciousnesses, and then put a bridge across them. And then which established a permanent presence. So the light itself doesn't deteriorate like. It's like a photograph. I take a photograph; it never changes. The room has changed already, even before the photographs come out. But the light itself doesn't. So the light itself is a permanent presence. So they took the polarities, their male and female polarities and so on, and extracted them apart and put them across the son and daughter, and that created a electromagnetic field between them. Chapter 4, if you haven't read yet, is the one you'll find the most interesting, because you're an electronic engineer. You will find that chapter extremely interesting. I was going to mention it on the phone and said, no, I won't spoil the surprise.
And one thing I have curious
but
about...
anyway, I'm going to let you get back to your question. I just want to finish up. So energy was created as the third attribute of the third newfound consciousness, which gave them intelligence, energy, and substance. The energy factor gave them will, desire, and action. And that's what has allowed them to be able to bring out outer manifestations into the lower dimensions as what we call creation. So that was the plan, the father principle, mother principle, only begotten son, daughter.
Because it's kind of reminiscent of Christ consciousness.
Well, the Christ consciousness is all about.
Christ is the only begotten entity, product of the mother-father, isn't it?
Absolutely correct.
And then Christ reincarnated as Jesus and Melchizedek and other 30 physicalities. And that's why he had the impression that he was the only begotten son.
Well, half true and half. There's a bit of a misconception, which is the religious one.
Yes.
Fair enough. If you can imagine, no matter who you are or where you are on the planet, your consciousness is the same as everybody else's. There's only one type of consciousness. If you're a Negro in Africa, still in a grass hut, and you're a New York businessman in New York and so on, differences in the sophistication zone, but the consciousnesses are the same. There's no difference in consciousness between you, me, or anybody else anywhere on the planet. If you can see that there's no difference between consciousness on this planet and on that planet, everywhere in creation, there's no difference in the consciousness of anybody, and the universal name for that consciousness is Christ.
Yes,
Christ consciousness is what it's all about.
I thought so,
now, Jesus, 2,000 years ago, taught and exemplified what Christ consciousness is, and for being the one to do that, he was called the Christ.
Now,
but it is the principle of the only begotten son, daughter of that whole Christ consciousness.
You have a special interest in this too. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I enjoy reading A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love, which is really Jesus' work, just explaining that whole consciousness.
Well, he did a milestone. I mean, he took the Old Testament gods, who are mostly, the god of fear, of vengeance, of you do what I tell you, or I'm going to, waste your land. I mean, these are all demigods of the time putting on a show for the energies that the people were giving back to them. And if they didn't think it was forthcoming, they'd put on a show and get it again. But Jesus taught about a loving, forgiving God. Totally different. Absolutely.
That's pure love and pure forgiveness.
That's the paradigm definitive between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And he had to bring through that idea of a forgiving, loving God, period.
Well, he simplified the whole thing, took you away from the hate and the vindictiveness and vengefulness of the gods at that time and how people reacted, and just left it pure love, and he forgave everybody that offended him and hurt him, killed him.
Well, it's responsibility. See, the principle of the father's thought, the principle of the mother's feeling, and the principle of the only begotten son daughter's responsibility. They take the only begotten son daughter takes the responsibility to undertake their will and desire to express the aspects of creation. We do the same thing down here. That's what it's all about, taking responsibility. And Jesus taught that element. It's we're not going to do it for you. You have to take the responsibility.
Yeah, we've been applying it at this level.
And it's starting to come to pass a lot more. I have a bit of a problem with evangelists and these guys. Pray to Jesus. Jesus will, answer your prayers, and God will give you your new car tomorrow. All you have to do is put in a $10 donation here, and we'll make sure it happens for you. Well, it's your responsibility that has to do it.
I didn't think that, that whole thing about getting a car, it didn't seem relative to the spirituality of the Christ.
No,
because it was just pure love.
If you want a car to do good works with, like I use an example here, food around at the food banks, you have a lot better chance of getting one than if you want a nice new SUV to go on a holiday with.
There's a lot of intelligence in the universe, and you do get a lot of help. And once you have good intention and goodwill and the right purpose.
Well, that was the thing, the forgiving part of it. Once you're shown that you're picking up your bootstraps and starting to take responsibility again for what you're doing and for yourself and so on, the past is past.
But he showed the pattern. He showed a loving pattern. And he had a terminology in his book called, I saw that Christ's vision, what he was seeing and how he saw people. And it's a beautiful vision of how he saw people. One full of love.
Well, don't forget, Christ was the, again, I don't know if this is going to go off topic or not. I should let you ask questions first. I did this with you. I kept going up and throwing stuff at him all the time.
I've got a few points that I think readers questions they'll be asking, just like I'm asking. We'll get those over with first. I was going to say, I've just finished reading most of the Edgar Casey material. And he tells us that Jesus had 30 incarnations in preparation for the one he had 2000. And one of his was Melchizedek and other famous people throughout history.
Well, he was wrong there, because Melchizedek's are in the fifth dimension. Like there's 12 with the planet. They're called planetary regions, and they will work through people through walk-in. You accept them in their consciousness. It's like a taxi, and then they sort of direct you around, do it, so on. Drunvelo Melchizedek is a walk-in Melchizedek. He's not a Melchizedek, but there was one who, because of the really, really torpid state of the time, did a material plane incarnation without going through the bodily process. And this was Melchizedek. All right. Because of, and this is all for things to come. I mean, it wasn't just like gung ho, because there's a new creation coming up, and the frequencies that were created by that action are important for the new creation. See? But he's incarnated now. This was Mancheveda. The Urantia book talks about Mancheveda Melchizedek. Well, he was the Melchizedek, and he's around again today. He's not doing anything. He's elderly. He was in a standby mode. This incarnation. Now, here's the thing about him that's so remarkable. Melchizedeks are known throughout creation for their mirthful, fun-loving personalities. They're very, very rich in personality. With this fellow, who I've known since the later 80s, you can't believe, he, just like I just did when I was going to talk, I chuckled in advance. Well, every time he opens his mouth, he chuckles in advance because he sees the humor in what he's going to say. And it's just a delight to be around.
So he's expressing Christ consciousness all the time, pouring out through him all the time.
Even though he's not doing anything, he did a very dry, third dimensional life. But at the higher action, boy, he's a busy fellow. But it was Christ consciousness involved, so Casey is correct about that. Melchizedek was tightly in tune with the man who we knew 2,000 years ago as Jesus Christ. He was tightly in communication with him. So,
I want to ask you a question about evil. Is there such a thing as evil and evil entities?
No. Well, there's if you can imagine. Well, let's put it. There are what we call evil entities. You know, the demonic ones in the fallen zone. But the ones that are on the planet are the rebellious ones out of the rebellion.
The Luciferic rebellion.
Yes. Yeah. Now they are awaiting the chance to reincarnate and start a path of redemption.
Oh yeah.
What's waiting for them is to take the responsibility to bend their knee to Christ. That they will accept responsibility for what they've done and take responsibility to help undo it.
And on page 279, you see that Lucifer himself has already commenced his redemption.
He's already started. He was last 3.5 million or 3 million years. He was on a solitary confinement on a planet called Zab. But real quick here, you have in your consciousness matrix, you have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And you've heard of Akashic records and stuff like that. Well, the horizontal axis holds all of the record of your daemons, your ascendant being or descendant being, your Delahnnovah, your Verona, whatever it is, your astrophysical sign like your Pisces, because they play a part in the higher gradations too. And the vertical one is your history, your reincarnations, all of the stuff you've done locally. But if the vertical starts to fall and collapse down to the horizontal, then you become corrupted. And if it gets down there, then you become fallen, like the fallen angels and so on. If you've reached a point where it will never happen that you can get that back up, it's seen that can't happen, then you're considered unredeemable, and then you're sent back up to the 16th dimensional.
Are they called the Black Masters?
Well, there was 500 Black Masters of Atlantis.
Oh,
that have been causing a lot of the problems that have been going on through humanity all the way through, even in behind the crucifixion of Christ. Yeah. But even now, the Illuminati and all these guys who were getting their instructions from the fourth dimension, these guys, they have now all incarnated. Incarnated except 5 that were sent back up to the absolute fires of intelligence energy in the 16th dimension. And those Akashic records are burned off. And then they're started out again completely new.
Clean slate,
clean slate.
Just for reference for those who are watching, that's page 332 is the Black Masters, that description of them. Yeah.
They
here's they were back to Casey. See, that some of them, when they're incarnation, they were given an attribute to work with, to show that they were sincere. If they did it properly, then they're free of their past. Yeah. Casey was given the sleeping prophecy thing. He passed 100%. Because he never even once took credit. God did it. This is from God. God all the way. He absolutely masterfully. So he's a great soul. He's redeemed. He has redeemed himself. He's a redempted son.
Isn't it true for all of us? That was the whole concept.
Well, sure. There's no exceptions.
Was the oneness and recognizing that oneness.
Yep.
That was the essence of
what it's accepting responsibility and then doing it. So you had Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was one of the Black Masters. He was one of the ones that were instrumental in the lasers that blew up Maldek 2.5 billion years ago, that reincarnated. They were brought into Atlantis because of the stability of Atlantis to try and help them. But they infiltrated the Sons of the Solitude, the elders of Atlantis and so on, and they brought it down to a state of debasement. And again, the faction is the 500 Masters, and again they used lasers, and that was the fires over Sodom and Gomorrah, because the atmospheres exploded. Not the whole planet this time, just the atmosphere over those 2 congested cities. But Reagan was reincarnated, and in 1984 he set up the Star Wars initiative, which is again using the lasers. So he didn't make it. He's got to go through a few more before he's out of it.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I remember some readings from the Course in Miracles talking about the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
And the Holy Spirit was there is there to help us find correction.
Well, that's 100%. See, that's the thing. It's so close, but so far away. It's close, but no cigar. The Holy Spirit is like the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit, as it's called another. But that the Mother is that part of the Holy Trinity that they call, the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost and so on, because the Mother's principle is feeling. Your intuitions, what you feel, and everything. You know that you know because you feel that you know it. You know what you know. You feel what you know. That's the Holy Spirit. It's the Mother side of creation, and it leads. It's your intuitions and your feelings that lead you. You know you're on the right path because you feel it. It's not because your mind tells you. Your mind will lead you there, but it's your feelings that tell you you're there, and that's the Mother side of it.
That'd be shifting in awareness then. becoming, as the Holy Spirit touches you and reaches to you, your feelings must...
Well, don't forget, this is not somebody up there doing this. This is what the religions try and teach you. This is your own female principle inside. You see, you have an intelligence, you have a substance,
right,
and you have an energy.
Right? but we all get help, though, right?
Well, your own.
That's why we're here, right? We're here,
well,
helping each other.
Well, you're an outer ego.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
But sitting in your pituitary is your real self, which is your triune celestial soul atom that decided, that you agreed to have an incarnation, agreed to take responsibility, so on, and formed an outer body around itself.
Right. Sure.
So that's your higher consciousness. Your lower consciousness, at the second of birth, the higher consciousness, or sorry, your soul atom, impels a sense of self-awareness into the physical body you've just created, melding your intelligence factor with your energy factor together into you, your outer ego. Right. You think you're you, da-da-da-da. Right. Well, that's all just fine. The whole idea is that your higher consciousness, your soul atom self, is always, through your whole lifetime, constantly steering you in the right direction by little elbows. Just constantly.
Yeah, right? Okay, I agree with you.
Even if you turn it down, even if you ignore it 20,000 times, it'll still give you the 20,000th and one. See? So that's, when you're talking about you're always being guided, always being steered, absolutely 100% true.
Yeah.
But it's your soul atom and so who isn't connected to the higher
sometimes
soul.
I feel that connection.
Yeah.
But there's other times I feel other connections.
Well,
and other energies. Like I'm pretty strong on angelic energy.
Yeah.
And to me, they're like brothers.
Yeah.
And
well, there's higher consciousness around. There's negative entities around too, psychic vampires around, but there's certainly a higher consciousness around all the time. And it's quite often that a soul atom from a higher dimension will project down. Remember I said the Melchizedek walk-in? Mm-hmm. Well, quite often a higher consciousness will assume you as a taxi for a while, and you'll feel a lot of things.
Quite well aware. Sometimes I'm quite aware.
It's going on all the
those,
time.
Those higher energies.
I'm not saying there isn't anybody that this can't happen to. It can happen to anyway. Even a guy minding goats. The next thing you know, he's King David. So. Yeah. All right.
Okay. I had another question. It's on page 181. You talk about Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Yep.
They were soulmate
pairs. Well,
soulmate pair, yeah.
This will take about 2 minutes, but it's an interesting point. You're interested in this stuff too, if I understand. I'm off camera with somebody that's also in the audience here. Fifth dimension and higher, all beings are androgyne, meaning they're female and male, like the only begotten son-daughter. Yeah. You're a male and a female in one. Now you're not just like a single consciousness. You're the two consciousnesses, but you're together as one kind of thing. You're one being. All right, it's androgyne. All right, fifth dimension up throughout all of creation. That's the way it is. All right.
Okay.
Man has, by default, 3.5 million years ago, through Luciferian influence, got trapped down into the third dimension of this planet because it had a third dimensional evolution on it to help bring its frequency back up to crystalline 12-strand DNA, something you know a bit about, which is just about completed. That whole program now is about completed. But 3.5 million years ago, Lucifer had worked out a way. This was the Luciferian rebellion. It was the result of people telling him not to do it, but he went ahead and did it, and then said, well, you can't tell me what I can't do. I'm going to do it anyway, kind of thing. But he had figured out a way to bring the fifth dimension. Fifth dimension is the bottom line of creation. All right, the third and the fourth dimension don't have anybody in it normally. Yeah. Do not have anybody in it normally. All right, it's like the boiler room of creation. But the fifth dimension is where it starts. All right, yeah. But Lucifer said, well, I can figure out a way here to bring consciousness down into the third dimension because it has a triune aspect: intelligence, energy, substance, first, second, and third dimension, and speed up the process because it's a very harsh environment. It will speed up their matriculation. They'll come up into triune awareness quicker. That was his original plan. He meant well. He shouldn't have meant well. But anyway, long and the short of it, 3.5 million years ago, man got the Adamic root race. The Adamics are the Asians. All of the different
Adamic race.
The Adamic race is the Asians of the planet. They're the true. They own the planet. The planet is. That's why China is starting to come up into. The Asian people are now starting to become raised up into the prominent social structure because now their time has come back.
It's like the chosen people in a way.
Well, it's the chosen
privileged
people. Yeah, let's get back to that chosen one because it's a different aspect in a way. The Adamics are the root race of the planet. They've got trapped in the third dimension. People from all over creation started coming in as volunteers to hold the planet, from falling apart, as it were, and to help raise them back up. We're now at that end of that whole process where the Adamics are now being raised back up. At the end of 2,000 years from now, everybody's going to be back up in the fifth dimension again where they belong. Your original question now. I got so far off topic.
Right.
Soulmates. We're talking about soulmates. So they, when they came into the third dimension, they were matrixed into the energy rules for the animal kingdom. We're matrixed we're actually an animal as we speak right now. We got the same lungs, the whole thing that an animal has.
Yeah.
We walk on 2 legs instead of 4. Some of them walk on 2 legs too. But everything they got, we got. More sophisticated or not, we have a bigger brain. But it's all exact. We're matrixed in an animal body.
Okay. Yeah.
The animal body is configured for a male and female external reproduction process.
Yeah.
When man fell into the third dimension, it was necessary, therefore, for the male and female halves to do a female and a male incarnation because they're in the animal matrix, which was divided.
It's very physical.
The two from the single fifth dimensional atom are the soulmates. You have a female on this planet that is your soulmate and none other, somewhere, and same with you.
Did it have to be an incarnation at any one moment?
Well, no. It's because of the circumstance of the planet. It's quite common that you're here, they're not for a while. Your incarnations are usually anywhere from 1 to 3 years apart. They could be literally on the opposite sides of the planet, and if and you're usually in adjacent astrophysical frequency. Like a Pisces will be a soulmate with an Aries, and a Taurus will be a soulmate with a Gemini, and so on.
So there's really no need for them to
mostly,
There's no real need for them to physically come in close contact.
Well, ideally it should be. It should be. If it wasn't for the fall of Atlantis and all the other problems and so on, there would be lots and lots of soulmate pairs. I know of 12 to 15 that actually did get together for a period of time. I only know of one that are still together, because usually they fought too, just like anybody else, But
at this level, we tend to fight a lot.
Well,
disagree a lot.
Yeah. No. A man and a woman that are married in a normal marriage relationship, and if they where Christ, where two or more are gathered in my namesake, there am I also. So there's good out of the bad conditions. There's good has come out of marriage. Good proper marriages. Arranged marriages are abomination. Sort of thing. Yeah. But the ideal thing is that you would be eventually, when things go back up to the fifth dimension. Of course, there won't even need to be soulmates anymore. You'll be back as
You'll be there together.
You'll be back as Androdyne. Yeah.
Bringing up the topic of animals, on page 280, you talk about pets.
This is interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because some people really love to know that their cat and their dog will be
animals,
come back again.
There's a new creation. This is what's going on with Earth right now. This planet is in the center of the whole entire universe. Let me qualify that by telling you that the whole entire universe right now is over 900 trillion light years across. Yeah. It's not 14.5 billion. It's over 900 trillion, and it's just not even out of diapers yet. It's just getting started. But there's a new step of creation taking place now, and Earth is right in the center of where that new frequency is starting up. That's why everything is going on here. The Luciferian thing just slowed things down and muddled things up a wee bit.
But that's being cleaned up.
But that's now being Armageddon is the cleanup of the
going on right now.
We're in the cleanup in the aftermath of the rebellion. We're well into it. It's called Armageddon. It's going through 1,000 galaxies. It's not going to be on a hillside.
We're not the only ones who are going through this.
No. And to put that in qualification too, 1,000 galaxies. The Luciferian rebellion only affected 1,000 galaxies because the energies here are different because of this new creation. This little area of space is unique because it's like fostering where this new bifurcation is taking place from. But there's out of the, I don't know how many countless planets there would be in 1,000 galaxies, because there's 100 billion stars, and each star has anywhere up to 12 planets. It's matrix for 12 planets.
So Christ Michael was the the
creator,
good guy
son, daughter. He's
opposing the Lucifer.
Well, it was in his watch that the Luciferian rebellion took place.
Okay. Yeah.
See, because a really quick background here. Our solar system, or this solar system here, belongs to a solar sector of 1,000 solar systems, and the headquarters of that is Orion. You know that. It's even in another arm of the galaxy. You look straight across. You're looking across over to another arm of the galaxy, but there's nothing between us. So that's why you see it so clearly. But Orion is the headquarters for this local sector. The local sectors, 1,000 of those, galaxies are comprised of local sectors. All right, that's the administrative breakup, and 1,000 galaxies comprise a local universe. Now, who we call the Bible's called the Archangel Michael. It says Michael and his angels won a war in the heaven. His angels, he's a boss. Yeah, he's not just. Michael and his angels won a war in the heaven. So Christ Michael of Nebadon is the creator, paradisical creator, son, daughter, who has put together this, is in charge of this local universe, right? Lucifer was the Lanadonidic, first level Lanadonic son, they're called, who was the administrator of this local solar sector. So the Luciferian rebellion itself, which is a fairly big topic in the book, and maybe we do this on or later if you want to get back to it.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah, but it only went out of all of the planets, out of the 1,000 galaxies, it only got as far as 28,000 planets, not very far. And of that, only 2,500 ever had a third dimension precipitated on the surface like Earth has. So it was a very, very, very small number, not without its irritations, because it was dealing with the energies and everything for this new creation, which were coming in now. That was the thing. This is 5 billion years ago. 5 billion years ago, when Lucifer came up with all that stuff, says, well, I found a way. He says, well, that's not a good idea because there's energies coming in, and your stuff isn't going to work well with it. Oh, well, so he went ahead.
Well, that brings up a point I wanted to bring up, the power of the X.
Oh, the unknown power of the X.
So that was what screwed up things for Lucifer, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's called the unknown power of the X, and that's an interesting factor. The official term, or however you want to call it, the official wording of the Luciferian rebellion was Luciferian self-will rebellion of the cosmic overplus. I have to go in deep to remember that.
Yeah.
It's the Luciferian self-will rebellion of the cosmic overplus. Now, I mentioned earlier you have your outer ego and Right. It's self-oriented. The animal world looks after itself before it looks after anything else. Yeah. Mothers in the nest look after their kids. But if you see somebody coming down the forest, you're not going to let them get the better of you. Outer ego looks after itself. So Lucifer's idea was to bring consciousness down into the third dimension, and then when that got all, obviously, mistakes started happening. Things started going wrong. Instead of saying you were right, I am wrong, he said, well, I rebuke all of that stuff. I do what I will, and that was the official declaration of the manifesto of the Luciferian self-will stand. So he took it in the third dimension levels, a way of being able to have the. And this is what all of the Eastern mystics, when they teach you meditation and ascension and all that kind of stuff, you build the outer ego up enough so it can sustain itself as a crystallized static form in the fourth and even up into the early fifth dimensions. That's what the ascension that they're talking about is all about. This is what Lucifer said. Well, here we can have our own universe. You don't have to have anything to do with this. You leave us alone. It's our self-will universe. We're catering to the outer ego self and not to the creators, okay? And this local universe has a special extra energy in it called the cosmic overplus. I'll have to explain what that is because all of this won't make any sense if I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
But it's called the cosmic overplus. And he misused that energy, all right? Now the cosmic overplus is simple. There's the outer creation right now is comprised of 7 huge super universes. And they're like bubbles around, like petals of a flower around the inner creation, which is around the 14th dimensional star, Cuban sphere of alchemy, and then everything from there, in behind that. But there's 7 super universes, and they're based on, if you take intelligence, energy, and substance, which is, energy of the father, substance of the mother, and that's wrong, intelligence of the father, substance of the mother, and energy of the only begotten son, daughter. If you take those 3. You can permute them, you're a mathematician, you can permute them 7 different ways. Energy, substance, and intelligence,
Different permutations of those, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got the first is like intelligence, energy, substance. Then the fourth is substance, energy. The fifth is substance, intelligence. The sixth is intelligence, energy, and the seventh is the triune, intelligence, energy, substance, in equal proportion. The first super universe was created biased on the side of intelligence. That means that intelligence was normal, but substance and intelligence were not intelligent. Energy were reduced. The second super universe bifurcated off it. And it was based on energy. So energy was normal, substance and intelligence were reduced, and so on. So there's a new super universe, the eighth, which is now being started up. Okay, and it's coming out of this local universe, which is in the super universe of triune intelligence, energy, and substance, but it's going to follow the same progression of intelligence, energy. So in order to be biased high in intelligence, there has to be an added intelligence factor in the frequency of this one, so that it's biased higher in intelligence, even though it's a triune expression. All right, so that higher than normal energy intelligence factor is called the cosmic plus. Plus is intelligence, so cosmic over plus. That's what this.
So it's like a super intelligence.
It's a super intelligence. Lucifer was ordained as a Lonodenic sun, quite a bit brighter than.
So he had that.
He had to have a higher intelligence to deal with it, and that's why he was able to see all these things that nobody else could see. But he missaw them, basically missaw them. But the unknown power of the X. Now we don't have here. There's let's see if I can find that.
Page 280, I have it marked. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to find. Here we go. Yeah, this is going to be really hard for you to see. It'd be a lot better if you're on the internet or had the book in your hand. But this is called a qubit, and you can see that there's an X factor there. All right. When the super cosmic overplus is added onto that, it actually surrounds the outside of the circle, this qubit, representing this local universe, in a galactic principle. And there's a difference between the distance of where the line stops normally, and then goes out and meets with the new cosmic overplus circle.
Yeah.
That little tiny bit has never been in creation before. Even the Alpha and Omega themselves don't know what it's because it's never been there before.
Wow,
so it's like let's see what happens. See, it's called the cosmic overplus. Sorry, the circle
the
is
X plus.
Yeah, it's called the unknown power of the X. It's the unknown power of the X.
Even the Alpha and Omega don't
know because
so they have no control. It's uncontrolled, and it can be for positive or negative, right?
No. Now, when this local universe was created and so on, with this unknown power, I mean, all of these things were taken into account that there would be unknown factors and so on. What Lucifer was doing was going outside of the realm of, this is anticipated stuff, we're doing here, but you're doing stuff that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't think you should do it.
They didn't know,
he said, that's a great idea. But what happened? They got away from them. That's what happened.
Yeah.
The original
like
Lucifer.
Fools rush in where angels fear to tread.
Oh, that's about as good as you could have put it. Absolutely as good as you could have put it. Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and they got away from them.
Yeah.
So that any changes associated with that, they're happening in our universe. The X.
The unknown power of the X, it's only in this. That's why the Luciferian umbrella couldn't go beyond this local universe of 1,000 galaxies, because this is the only one in all of creation, 900 trillion light years, that has an overplus factor.
Right here now.
Yeah. And it was the overplus. Lucifer used the there's a through the overplus factor. Like normally, I mentioned earlier that in the Evanpool, the intelligent breath and the particle substance never connect, even though they're interspersed. They're interspersed. Where one is, the other is, but they don't touch each other.
No.
Like
yin and yang. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Except there's no contact at the boundary.
No.
Of that little black and white thing. See.
Like a boundary or a membrane.
Yeah. Well, there isn't any there. In the Evanpool, there isn't. Okay, but with the and even in that, you can't see it now, but that qubit thing I showed you, intelligence is the circle. That yellow thing on the outside, what substance represents. That's how the intelligent design works. These things represent aspects of creation represented by the geometry. The intelligent design is not the geometry. All right. But at any rate, you can they don't meet. They don't touch.
No.
They don't touch.
Well, it's like matter, antimatter. Would they annihilate each other if they?
Well, don't forget the antimatter that man is used to. It's the experiments. The experiments they do in the cyclotron zone. They'll create things for brief periods of time that don't exist in nature. Some do, but some don't. The antimatters that aren't the antimatter, like this new creation I've been mentioning, is going to be in Andromeda, and it's an antimatter creation. The 7 super universes were built on the side of matter, which is the male side, and the new 7 super universes that are starting out with the first one just starting, and we're at the beginning of that, are going to be based on the female side, which is antimatter. But the difference is that antimatter is consciousness. You know, in a certain way, when consciousness is used, probably actually consciousness is an antimatter expression.
Yes.
So instead of like intelligence energy substituted, and then Christ consciousness comes out of it and expands, which is what's going on with this creation, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to start from Christ consciousness, and then intelligence energy substance are going to come out of it.
Will we observe anything? How will that affect us?
Well. All of that's going on. I mean, there's things that the Battle of Iron Rings that you don't see it. You know, Christ Michael is back. A few people have seen him, but most people aren't aware of it. If you look at chapter 39 in the book, any of the UFO buckets and so on, they're looking for flashing lights. Oh, I saw 3 red lights. Well, if somebody's come from trillions of light years across the universe and so on, it's at 10,000 times the speed of light. And here they are. They don't need flashing lights to tell them where they're going. You kind of got to think that. You know what I mean? But there's the Revelation says, when he returneth, he cometh with clouds. Now these are very, very distinct cloud formations. They're all over the place all the time.
The converging clouds.
Yeah, the lines. They're ionized lines, like magnetic lines in the cloud, the ionized cloud, and they meet at a focal point about 15, 20 degrees off the horizon. That's the telltale. Because those are chemtrails. Well, chemtrails meet at the horizon. You know, by parallax.
Parallel.
But these are right clear as a bell. There's the focal point right there. And there's a magnetic ship from the 5th dimension sitting there. The heavenly host is outside the orbit of Pluto. Millions and millions and millions and millions of them. All right? The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are the 4 great motherships of the fleet.
The 4 great
motherships.
Motherships
of the fleet.
Oh yeah. And they're parked out there, as it were.
Yeah. Now what happens is that you'll get a pair of scout ships will come into the 5th dimension and then set up camp. Right? Before long, you've got a radial, and this is chapter 39. If you want to see what I'm talking about here, go and look at that. You can go on the internet, Revelatorium, or you can get the book. It's the same thing. But you'll see the radial lines. Where there's a white puff of cloud at the apex, that's the positive pole. There's a single scout ship sitting there setting up a monopole. At the other side, which you don't see often at the same time, it's exactly the same thing, only it's blank in the middle. That's the negative pole. And so if you follow the lines like a way out here and come around, they'll come into there. I mean, it's a magnetic field. It's absolutely 100% a magnetic field. And the mothership, not the great mothership of the fleet, but a mothership is sitting right up there in the middle. The scout ships hold the mothership. And they're all over the planet all the time.
And what's their purpose? What are they doing there?
Oh, well, they're communicating down with, I mean, you know, you get a buzz, I get a buzz, you get a buzz. They're communicating with people all the time.
They still allow us free choice, though.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to do it. You know, you get the buzz and you can go and have a coffee at Tim's and said, you know, or you can say, geez, you know, I should go over and check out, you know, I mean, it's free will. By the way, that's a good point to make up, free will. Why, even Christ Michael, these guys have free will. Everybody in creation has free will. Because you have will from the intelligent side, you have desire from the female side. When will and desire are properly met together, that produces the energy, because it's like the only begotten son daughter was begot. That's why. So you have will, desire, and action, which is
to
the
manifest.
Energy side. Yeah. So if you don't have will and desire in the proper proportion, that you don't have the right amount of energy, and whatever it is isn't going to work properly. See? So free will, period, is always given no matter what. So the proper amount of desire is there at the same time. You have to want to do. If free will wasn't, if it said you've got to do this, there's no desire.
No.
There cannot be the proper amount of energy. It's as simple as that. Even the highest of the highest of the highest, creation beings.
They have desire too.
They have exactly the same free will that we have. Because if the will is dictated, then there can't be their proper amount of desire. There has to be the two in balance. And the desire is from the female mother side.
Okay.
You can feel that you want to do it.
Oh, yeah,
you can say, I want to do this, but until you get that motivation to do it, it ain't going to happen.
Passion, yeah.
Yeah,
we interrupted you, Ron. Did you want to?
I was trying to, because I have a kind of a connection with the angelic kingdom.
Sure.
I'm trying to make a connection between the Archangel Michael and Christ Michael.
Well, it's the same person. It's the same person. It's the same person.
But Michael has been here for a long time.
Oh, Michael's been around.
Yeah.
Michael's been around.
But this is something new you're talking about. The Christ.
Well, it's the knowledge. The Urantia book is the only thing I know of. Now, the Urantia book has some good things in it and some not so good things in it. So I'm not steering you to the Urantia book. All right.
Okay.
But if you have read the Urantia book, you will have read about Christ Michael.
Okay.
All right. Christ Michael. The local universes are the creative work of a paradisical son-daughter. Okay. They plan what it's going to do there. They present it to the Holy Trinity for approval. The approval is given, and then they set it all up and run it. Right. Every time in evolution, I mentioned like the root race, the Adamic root race, and so on. Well, planets have root races. This is another long story, but anyway, planets have root races at a certain point, and this is all in the fifth dimension. Okay. At a certain point in their evolution, they have been learning about the existence of Christ. I don't mean the person, but the principle, the expression of Christ. Now they're going to have a chance to see somebody in their midst that's going to express it and tell them and show them what it is to be a Christ by example. Tell you about it and show you by your example. So that's called the Christ bestowal. Once that evolution has gone through enough incarnations and as many different planets have taken, they're ready for that step, then usually a paradisical teacher son or even magisterial son or something, will do a fifth dimensional bestowal and be their Christ for 1,000 years. Now they see what it's all about. They've been learning about it. Now they see it. They move, now this is proper ascension up into the seventh dimension, and now they start going through a similar long period of learning how to do it. They've seen it happen, they know it's real, we saw what now we're going to learn how to do it, and then when that's done, then they're into the inner dimension on the way back up to paradise to get trinitized.
I've seen a lot of names of spiritual beings who seem to be going around and taking responsibilities in different areas. And
Michael's got a pretty big crew.
Yes, that's about it. Well, it wasn't just Michael, it was like other. Well, they took different responsibilities at different times.
But back to Christ Michael, because this is still
that's where I started.
This is your important question. On only one such bestowal in a local universe, the Creator Son Daughters themselves.
I'm hearing that word.
Bestowal? A bestowal, B-E-S-T-O-W-E-L.
Oh, a bestow.
They bestow Christ experience to the root race. They bestow to them the reality of Christ. They bestow, right? So, in one and only, out of all of the planets of the local universe that has bestowals going on, one of them will be done by the Creator Son Daughter themselves. For their own, they take a step there to do for their own experience. So, always in the fifth dimension. All right. This planet was where Christ Michael of Nebadon bestowed.
Yes.
But it was in the third dimension because that's where the Adamics were 2,000 years ago. Still now, but starting to make the moves of raising enough in consciousness. 2,000 years from now, everybody's going to be back in the fifth dimension. There won't be anybody on the surface. 2000 at the end of Aquarius, right? So that's where the confusions of Michael the Archangel come in, because he's referenced in the Bible a number of times, but he's the boss. Michael is the big guy, and he was who we knew as Jesus Christ of Nazareth 2,000 years ago. Mary Magdalene was his soulmate. That's we started off with that very question at the beginning.
What about other angels, Gabriel and Uriel or Raphael?
Well, they've been in and out. I mean, they've all had incarnations. But don't forget, when they're, man doesn't know these are going on. A lot of the times. Christ Michael is incarnated. I can't remember the name. At the turn of the century, there was a 4-year-old Brazilian boy that was absolutely astounding in his spiritual.
You mentioned that.
Yeah,
he died young.
Yeah, he died 4. He died at 4. But that was Christ Michael doing an incarnation into Brazil to set up the frequencies of the South America for the different countries that are there now. That was all part of the revelations. You know, that he wasn't able to do 2,000 years ago. He got cut off. He did everything on his plate except one thing. Like the Moonies guy, what's his name? Sun Mun Moon?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus failed in his work 2,000 years ago, so I've been sent to finish it. So follow me, I'm your guy. You know, and you've got millions and millions of people following that malarkey.
What about John?
I'm sorry, Mr. Moon.
John of God in Brazil. Do you think he might be, or people like him, great angelic beings who've incarnated?
Quite possible. Quite possible. You know, it works both ways. You know, somebody twigs on. Oh, I think I'm the next thing you know, they make themselves that. You know, but the same token, somebody's. I mean, everyone they all believe in reincarnation. Nobody has ever asked me in all these years, 40 some odd years, where are the disciples?
Oh yeah.
Well,
the Dalai Lama you mentioned.
Oh well, the Dalai Lama
is not the real. No.
There's a good example of sort of what his parents. In the 70s and early 80s, the boy guru, 12-year-old kid came out of India with a high, you know, the boy guru really big. Well, he's the actual true Dalai Lama. His parents, when he was 2 or 3, like this, the boy in Brazil, you know, astounding spiritual awareness. He must be an incarnated ascended master.
Yeah.
So they raised him as a ascended master. So that cut him all off completely. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of the Adamic race.
Oh, yeah.
And is the one who at this point was to have led them back into Christianity. I don't mean Christianity in the religious sense, but back into the Christ consciousness that was taught.
Yes.
See, Jesus taught Christ consciousness 2,000 years ago. He didn't teach Christianity.
No.
Christianity is what got made out of what he taught, and it's only like 1% of what
he was here, he wouldn't be a Christian today, no.
Right. He would not be a Christian today, no. He'd be a firebrand. I was telling somebody about Jesus was a firebrand, you know.
Yeah.
He said, what do you mean by firebrand? Well, he made no bones about what he was saying, and he wasn't afraid to let it fly and let you have it.
That brings another point.
Because he didn't broach
the great crime of celibacy.
Sure.
What place does celibacy have in
well,
all
it's again, if you're if you have decided that you're going to take responsibility to get your consciousness back up to where it should be, you're not yet with your soulmate. All right.
Oh, yeah.
And this answers the Holy Grail. You talked about the Holy Grail. Well, if your seminal fluids are internalized,
yes.
All right, the pressure builds and the fluid rises up the spine, and it goes up, down through, and it stimulates
to the pineal,
and it stimulates
the Kundalini energy.
Well, not the Kundalini. That's Earth given. That's part of the animal thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
But it's similar. But it stimulates the penile pituitary resonance. It's called the Holy Grail. And since manna from heaven is the true sustenance, then the rise up the spine is called the fountain of youth. It's not in a swamp in Florida. It's up your spine. Everybody has a fountain of youth. Most people don't know it, and most people aren't working with it because they're externalizing their fluids at a fantastic rate. You know what I'm saying? But if you internalize it, then your higher energies, your third eye opens up. I mean, all these things will take place. But you got to want to do it. Now, the revelatorium, I'm sticking my face right out into the middle of the world here, but I was celibate for over 30 years. This couldn't have come through my consciousness without being.
If you hadn't been,
If it hadn't been, yeah. And a lot of people know that. It's not this is not news. The fountain of youth part of it is news. But internalizing your and you know, what's the word, celibacy, that's known by a lot of people. You know, that's not new. And they know it's a good thing to do. They don't know why, but they do know it's a good thing to do. So.
We have reached close to an hour now, and I'm wondering, should we stop?
Well, I'm parked okay. I'm not. We bought a parking ticket this time.
3 minutes, an hour and 3 minutes. So, in closing, let's see if we have any closing comments.
No, I'm just trying to absorb everything.
I'm wondering if we're still back on Christ Michael and the Incarnation. I'm just trying to think, did we finish that off?
Well, there's one thing I did want to mention, and it's part of my awareness. there's times when I can get into meditation and I can connect with angelic beings or spiritual beings and feel their energy. And it's very supportive. It's uplifting, it's supporting, and it's meant to be. And that's why I was saying earlier how we do get lots of help.
Well, that's going on all the time. The thing you have to be aware of, though, the negative entities can tune in, but you have to have a kind of negative consciousness to do that.
But if you keep it positive, at least you can strive.
One question I have about
if you're reading stuff like you're on an internet, I'm a channeler, if you don't see the word Christ in there, go somewhere else. That's the simplest thing I can tell you. If you don't, if it's me, and look what I can do, and I'm doing this and so on, you don't see Christ.
Selfishness, What about, can we tap into the unknown power of the X? Is it like 0 point energy?
Well, no, 0 point energy is a very good question. It's not the same. The fourth dimension, third and fourth dimension. When I say it's like the basement of creation, or the boiler room kind of thing. Well, creation starts from the 18th dimension all the way down to the subtler, higher, more and more refined. So we're down to the 5th dimension, pure intelligence. There. But the 3rd dimension makes a contact back up to the Evan pool. And tiny particles of substance will coalesce as little fragments. They pop in, pop out fragments, and then they get bigger and bigger, and now you got matter, you got the fermions, you got the electrons, protons, and then you got matter, and that. The Evan pool of darkness is everywhere. There's no end to it. All right. So that is absolutely at rest. All right. It also has this super high vibration in it, but it has nothing else going on. So effectively, it doesn't have temperature, it doesn't have any of the, because there is no energy in the Evan pool. Energy doesn't even start until the 16th dimension down. Right? So when these particles coalesce, precipitate out of from the connection up to the 18th in the 3rd dimension, whatever local universe that takes place in, it's being carried along because that is in motion already from all of the eternities of evolution and so on. So the difference between the motion and the eternal rest of the Evan pool is the momentums and stuff, and the difference in the 0 temperature to the ambient of the is now 0 temperature. See, man's starting to discover that connection back to the Evan pool, 0 point energy. They're just starting to now. God forbid that they try and make a weapon out of it,
Of course.
Which I don't think they'll be allowed to. Actually, I don't think they'll be allowed to myself,
Well, I think we've come to a conclusion, and thank you, Del, and thank you, our audience here, and thank you, Ron. Thank you.
Well,
enjoyable.
And thank you, Chris and Hugh, for making this possible.
Thank you very much for inviting me, John. Can I make a quick...
Please.
I asked John, after I had done my first interview with Hugh a month or so ago, I asked John about an interview. He said, well, I've looked at the...
Get the Scottish accent right.
And he said, it's a little bit tough for my audience. And I said, well, you look at the chapter on the crucifixion of Christ and some of the others. They're a lot easier reading if you can get familiar, because it's a different language. The Revelatorium is not written in Hemingway, and the Thackeray type languages. You get familiar with the language, and then you can go back and start looking at some of the tougher chapters that are there and so on. Well, okay. Well, you phoned me back 2 weeks ago. He said, well, I've been looking at the Revelatorium, and he said, I'd like to have an interview with you now. And I thought, oh boy, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Good job. All right.